We've been asking over and over again, we show up and we're asking for transparency. And now the money is being shifted around in general funds. And so it's even harder to track. So not only does the city have a responsibility to report that back to the federal government and how we spent that money, but we have an obligation. You have an obligation to the residents here. You know, you can't berate the mayor for the same thing that you are allowing to happen within the city council by not accounting for these funds that belong to the residents here. That's all we're asking. We as a coalition, organizations have come forward again and again and again, and we keep asking the same thing. That is your responsibility. We voted you into office to help us recover and become something better. And the first step in that, as you know, is transparency. There's not, that's all we're asking for. And it's a responsibility that you carry. We voted you into office. We pay your salaries with our taxes. We buy groceries, whether you're documented or not. When we buy groceries, we pay sales taxes. When we pay rent, there's taxes. When we do anything in the city, we're always supporting the city. When we work, when we play, and we just ask that you take on that responsibility. We have a new city council, and we were expecting a lot from you, not the old ways, the new ways. And you have the power to do that. And that is all we're asking for. Some transparency with regard to this ARPA funding, spending it on the citizens, not just on the losses that the city has incurred when we know there are extra funds out there. So please, if the funds are going to get mixed into general funds, put it on the record. Show an accounting. That's why we have an accounting department. That's what Montano's for. That's his job. Make him do it.
Hey, Courtney, can you get us a list of all the items that ARPA money has been spent for, written out and on paper, white paper, and then we can pass it out during our next budget meeting so that you all can have it. We'll also post it online or send it out through some type of news release.
And the other thing I just wanted to ask, thank you, I appreciate that, is that when we come to these meetings, residents aren't just English speakers, but there's never an interpreter here. We at the New Orleans Workers Center for Racial Justice always bring an interpreter so that when people do come, they can understand what their government is doing. So we're asking the city council to please make sure when these public hearings, the council meetings are here, why don't we just have an interpreter available? Then it's not an issue. Yeah, and the documents as well. De nada. Thank you.
Yeah, just to respond briefly to the item that's on the agenda. The money is not being shifted around to a new purpose. The money is simply being parked because it cannot be expended in the way it was intended as it went through the budget process.
And that's why we're asking.
Right. So when I presented what was happening to the money, it is not being moved to a new project. It is simply being taken out of the NOPD's budget for a brief period of time because it is not required at this time because the Attorney General has opined that there has to be a delay in which it can be allocated. So I agree with the vast majority of your comments, but when you kind of intimated we're shifting money around today to do something different, where I am telling you, and I said previously, that is not the case. The $6 million that was allocated in the budget process is going towards the same goal it was in the previous budget process. It's simply being parked because the money cannot be spent in the time period in which it was originally allocated to be spent. That being said, and I think Councilman Giarrusso really hammered home with this, I share a tremendous amount of your concerns in the way ARPA money has been spent or allocated. I've said repeatedly, I am very concerned, and I have repeatedly given pushback and will continue to give pushback on relying upon ARPA money to patch the budget, because I think that is an inappropriate use of ARPA funds. I think it's inappropriate because, one, it allows there to be less transparency with general funds as you take those general funds and move them around. And two, relying upon ARPA funds, which is one-time money, to stabilize a budget is exactly what Bobby Jindal did on the Jindal years, which led to the budget imploding at the state level. So there needs to be a tremendous amount of accounting on ARPA. There is, I believe, around $80 million left of ARPA funds that has not been allocated. And the council's position, which you should continue to hold us to account for, was that no further ARPA money would be spent without a transparent process. I think also, generally speaking, there's $100 million roughly left of general fund dollars, which also needs to be spent in a transparent fashion.
Mhm.
And what is very frustrating is that when we hear from residents that there are needs that could be met with either of those funds, there does not seem to be an urgency to take those funds to address those issues and to have a public debate on whether or not those ongoing concerns could be addressed with the money we're sitting on.
However, we and other organizations have been asking for a seat at the table. We've been asking for open meetings to do this. The meetings that the mayor held were just for providing information on what she was doing. She was not requesting information from the community on what they needed. There's been, CBNO has tried to work with the city to get public hearings, but if you don't give us a seat at the table or give the community a seat at the table, what does that mean? Like, yeah, why don't we just put it on the agenda and then we can talk about it?
Well, I think that's something I will have a conversation with the chair of budget. I think that's something worth adding to the agenda of just saying, why not have on the budget agenda a conversation every time we have a budget meeting about what are potential avenues in which money could be spent.
Exactly. That's all we're asking.